What kind of emperor kills the woman he loves, only to force a young boy to replace her? Nero's story is more horrifying than you think. Rome, 67 AD. The empire stretched across 3 continents. Its legions marched with discipline that crushed kingdoms. Its wealth flowed into the capital in streams of gold, grain, and slaves. In marble forums and candlelit palaces, senators debated, poets performed, and merchants struck deals that shaped the ancient world. And yet in the center of this grand empire stood a man who would unravel into madness, Nero Claudius Caesar. His reign began with promise, but his obsessions ended in a tragedy so grotesque that it still chills us 2,000 years later. This is the story of Nero, his lost wife Poppaea, and the boy named Sporus, who was forced to become her replacement. When Nero first became emperor at 16, the Roman world dared to hope. He was young, charming, and eager to please. He cut taxes, opened theaters, and even performed on stage himself. Crowds cheered when he sang, believing they were seeing a new kind of ruler, an emperor of the people. But behind the cheers were whispers. Senators sneered at his theatrics, generals resented his inexperience, and Nero, though loved by the public, began to feel isolated at the top of a mountain where no one could truly challenge him. Power without resistance corrupts, and Nero had no one to tell him no. Into this world stepped Poppaea Sabina. She was more than beautiful, though her beauty was legendary. She was intelligent, ambitious, and understood power. Ancient writers describe her as cunning, with eyes that could command attention across a crowded room. She was everything Nero's wife Octavia was not. Octavia, daughter of the former Emperor Claudius, was quiet, dutiful, and politically necessary. But she lacked charm, and their marriage was cold. Poppaea, bold and vivacious, represented fire and passion. Nero became obsessed. He divorced Octavia, shocking Rome, and within months married Poppaea in a ceremony of unmatched luxury. For Nero, Poppaea was not just a partner, she was a jewel. He surrounded her with guards, not for her safety, but to control her. He lavished her with treasures, silks from the East, pearls from the Red Sea, perfumes from Arabia. He ordered endless portraits and statues made, so that even when she was not present, he could gaze at her likeness. But obsession is not love. To Nero, Poppaea was an object to own, not a person to cherish. Poppaea was not silent. She argued with Nero. She teased his performances, mocked his obsession with fame, and pushed back when he acted rashly. Unlike the cowards who surrounded the emperor, Poppaea dared to speak truth to him. One night, the truth proved fatal. Accounts differ. Some say the argument was about chariot races, others about theater, others about his endless vanity, but all agree on the outcome. In a rage, Nero struck Poppaea, who was pregnant with their child. Whether it was a violent kick or a savage blow, the result was the same. She collapsed, blood spilling onto the marble floor. Hours later, both mother and unborn child were dead. Nero, who commanded legions, who ruled an empire of 60 million souls, had destroyed the one thing he claimed to love most. The Roman court fell into stunned silence. But Nero's grief was not that of a husband. It was the grief of a god unhinged. He refused to cremate her body, embalming it instead. He built a tomb more elaborate than those of previous emperors. He declared her divine, establishing a cult in her honor. Priests performed rites to Poppaea the goddess. At banquets, her chair was left empty, but draped in silk, as though she were simply absent. Nero himself wandered the palace halls, whispering to her corpse, demanding that she return, begging her forgiveness. Courtiers were forced to play along, speaking of her as if she were still alive. To contradict him meant exile, or worse. But memory was not enough. Nero wanted more than statues and embalmed flesh. He wanted Poppaea back, in body and spirit. It was then that his eyes fell on Sporus. Sporus was young, perhaps 14 or 15. He had been born into slavery in the imperial household but later freed. Like many palace youths, he was educated for administrative work, serving quietly in the background. His life, while not free, was stable, until Nero noticed his face. Sporus bore an uncanny resemblance to Poppaea. His eyes, his delicate features, even the curve of his jaw echoed the dead empress. To Nero's broken mind, this was no accident. This was destiny. Here was his chance to undo what could not be undone. But Sporus was male. For Nero, this was a minor detail. He believed himself more than a man, more than mortal.
He had spoken to corpses, built cults to the dead, and convinced himself he could reshape reality. If the gods would not give him back Poppaea, he would force the world to. Nero summoned physicians. Their orders were clear. Sporus was restrained. In a crude, brutal operation, he was castrated, his body mutilated to erase his manhood and shape him into Nero's fantasy. The procedure was excruciating. Ancient surgery was primitive, often fatal. Sporus survived, but he would never be the same. His identity, his future, his ability to live as himself, all taken. Nero renamed him Sabina, after Poppaea herself. He dressed him in silks, painted his face, adorned him with jewels that once belonged to the dead empress. And then, in an act that shocked even jaded Roman elites, he married him. The imperial wedding was no private affair. It was a spectacle. Senators, generals, nobles, Rome's elite watched as Nero stood proudly beside the boy dressed as a bride. There were vows, there were feasts, there were parades through the streets. Sporus, now Sabina, was treated as the Empress of Rome. In public he was carried in litters, honored at banquets, bowed to as though he were Poppaea herself reborn. Whispers spread. Some said the emperor had lost his mind. Others dared not speak at all. To question Nero was to risk death. For Sporus, life became a nightmare in silk. He could never again be himself. To Rome he was not Sporus. He was Sabina, a boy erased and remade as the shadow of a dead woman. Ancient accounts described his silence, his hollow obedience. He smiled when commanded, bowed when required, and existed only to fulfill Nero's delusion. He was, in every sense, a living doll. Behind the jewels and gowns was a terrified child, enduring humiliation with no escape. The people of Rome whispered. Senators gossiped in shadows. Historians recorded their disbelief, yet no one challenged Nero openly. His power was absolute. He had turned grief into a grotesque performance, and the empire played along. But cracks were forming. Nero's extravagance bankrupted the treasury. His paranoia alienated allies. Rebellion brewed in the provinces. And through it all, Sporus remained at his side, a silent symbol of the emperor's madness. By 68 AD, the empire erupted in revolt. The Senate declared Nero an enemy of the state. His guards deserted him. Alone, abandoned, he fled the city. Days later, with enemies closing in, Nero ended his own life. The man who thought himself divine died not in triumph, but in disgrace. But for Sporus, the nightmare did not end. Powerful men who followed Nero claimed him. He was paraded again, forced into humiliations, treated as a trophy of Rome's most depraved ruler. He had no path to freedom. His resemblance to Poppaea, once his curse, remained his prison. Sporus became a symbol, not of Rome's greatness, but of its cruelty. His life was proof that absolute power can strip away not just freedom, but identity itself. History remembers Nero for fire, cruelty, and madness. But Sporus' tragedy tells a deeper truth. It shows how absolute power twists love into obsession, grief into madness, and human beings into shadows of another's desire. One boy, chosen not for who he was, but for who he resembled, was forced into the role of a dead woman, a victim of one man's grief and Rome's silence. This is the dark side of history, not of glory, but of suffering, because sometimes the truth is darker than any legend.